Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church online worship. My name is Julia Jones. I'm the ministerial intern here at Beverly, and I'm so glad to welcome you to worship today. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation of children, youth, and adults of many races, religions, secular identities, genders, sexual orientations, abilities, educations, life experiences, and traditions. Here, we celebrate a diversity of beliefs, striving always to make space for more. All of you are sacred. All of you is sacred. You are welcome here. Whatever your past or present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. Like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we affirm 7 principles, which are not doctrine or dogma, but rather shared values, a moral guide. To learn more about these principles, please visit the website of our denomination at www.uua.org. Our minister here at Beverly Unitarian is the Reverend David Schwartz. Reverend David and I especially welcome visitors and hope you'll stay for the virtual coffee hour after the service on Zoom, using the link that will be shared at the end of the service. We look forward to the day when we'll be able to meet you in person. Although we currently remain distanced physically, we can stay connected. To get more involved, check out our Facebook page and our website. Contact the office to sign up for our monthly newsletter and weekly Friday email blast, or to be connected to Reverend David for pastoral care. And now, let us join together in spirit and prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. 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 Come, yet again come.
Please join me in our chalice lighting words this morning. We light this chalice in celebration of the gift of life. May its light be a beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning. Infinite love, be here with us now.
Our opening words are from the poet Mark Nepo. He writes this about being a pilgrim. He says, "To journey without being changed is to be a nomad, And to change without journeying is to be a chameleon, but to journey and be transformed by the journey is to be a pilgrim. It doesn't mean the kind with hats with shoe buckles on them. He means a real pilgrim. To journey and be transformed by the journey is to be a pilgrim. He says we all start out as pilgrims, wanting to journey and hoping to be transformed by the journey. But just as it is impossible when listening to an orchestra to hear the whole of the symphony for very long, before we're drawn to hear only the piano or the violin, in just this way, our attention to life slips, and we experience people and places without being affected by their wholeness. And sometimes, feeling isolated and unsure, we change or hide what lives within in order to please or avoid others. The value of this insight is not to use it to judge or berate ourselves, but to help one another see that integrity is an unending process of letting our inner experience and our outer experience complete each other, in spite of our very human lapses. I understand these things so well, he says, because I violate them so often. Yet as you, I consider myself a pilgrim of the deepest kind, journeying beyond any one creed or tradition into the compelling, recurring space in which we know the moment and are transformed by it. Mysteriously, as elusive as it is, this moment, where the eye is what it sees, where the heart is what it feels. This moment shows us what is real is sacred. Friends, will you join me in the words of our covenant? Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. There you go. Good dog. You're on camera, buddy. This story is the hidden treasure of Rabbi Isaac. And it takes place long ago and far away in the city of Krakow, which is the most beautiful city in Poland, which is a country far, far from here. There was a rabbi, a Jewish teacher, who was very, very poor. He had little to eat. He had old clothes. He had only one pair of shoes. That was it. His house was tiny. His floor was dirt. His wood stove was set right in the dirt floor. You actually would have loved that, but for us, it's less good. Even so, every Friday night, he would always say the prayers and light the candle to remember that the holy is here among us. His name was Rabbi Isaac. After many years, he dreamt that someone told him to look for a treasure. They said the treasure was under a bridge which leads to a king's palace. And they said the king's palace was far away in the city of Prague. And then the next night, he had the same dream. Go and look for treasure under the bridge which leads to the king's palace in the city of Prague. And then the third night in a row, he had the same dream. Go look for a treasure under a bridge that leads to a king's palace in the city of Prague. So, what are you going to do in a story like this? He prepared for the journey and set out to walk to Prague. It would be like walking from here to Cleveland. Have you been to Cleveland by car? It's really long by car, let alone walking. At last he arrived in Prague, and he found the bridge that led to the king's palace. But there was a problem. The bridge was guarded day and night by soldiers, so Isaac couldn't start digging. The guards would throw him in jail. Still, he went to the bridge every morning, and he kept walking around it until evening. And finally, the captain of the guards, who had been watching him, came over. He didn't ask for Isaac's name. He only demanded whether he was looking for something or waiting for somebody. And Rabbi Isaac told him about the 3 dreams which had brought him here from his home far, far away. And the captain laughed, not very kindly. So because of a dream, you wore out your only shoes to come here? If I had faith in dreams, I would have had to get going when a dream told me to go to Krakow and dig for treasure under the stove in the room of a Jew, Isaac the rabbi. Go find treasure under the stove in the house of Isaac the rabbi, said my dream. I can imagine what that would be like. And half the Jews there are named Isaac and the other half are rabbis. And he laughed again, not very kindly. Rabbi Isaac said nothing. But now he knew where to find the treasure. He traveled home. He dug up the treasure under his own stove. And with that money, built the house of prayer, which is called the Rabbi Isaac Shul. The house of prayer, which stands there still in Krakow, 350 years later, having survived fire and war. That's the story of Rabbi Isaac. And I end it with the riddle. This riddle that ends the story when it's told. Here's the riddle. Take this story to heart and make what it says your own. There is something you cannot find anywhere in the world, not even at the house of a miracle worker. And there is, nevertheless, a place where you can find it. I think Pilate's found it.
In a world that is hurting and in need, there is only the power that we are willing to access and contribute to make things better. It is easy, after running a pandemic marathon of endurance, to find ourselves depleted. It is easy to forget that we have power beyond our simple will to keep moving forward. It is perhaps common to try to force ourselves into plans and activities to find a new spark. I ask you this morning to join me in turning to one another for fuel, for courage, for energy, and for inspiration, to let go of attempting to whip your will into shape and turn instead to the treasure, the fuel that you have co-created and to which you are already entitled. This blessing is adapted from one written by Reverends Sarah and John Gibb Millspaugh. I'll ask you now to close your eyes if you're willing, and to picture some members of Beverly Unitarian, or if you're new to our community, to picture some beloved members of your community, past or present. Take a moment to gather them into your attention, to picture them, to see them, to think about times you have shared. As you continue to picture them, breathe in and out, sharing that breath with your friends and your beloveds, with your community. Bless them with your attention and affection. Bless them with your presence and consciousness. Feel the love of your community flow into you and through you out into the world again. Let that love flow outward to its height, its depth, its broad extent. You are more than you know, and more beloved than you know. Take up what power is yours to create safe haven, to make of earth a heaven. Give hope to those you encounter, that they may know safety from inner and outer harm. Be happy and at peace, healthy and strong, caring and joyful. Be the blessing you already are to one another and to the world. That is enough. Blessed be, and amen. Friends, as we gather here in this digital space, the blessing that we are to one another is made new through support and celebration. We teach and learn compassion, community, trust and reciprocity, relationship, through the sharing of our joys and sorrows. Each week we are invited to strengthen our bonds by sharing. We invite you to share your joys and sorrows at this time in the chat, remembering that our chat is public. If you're holding an experience too tender to name, please type I in the chat as though raising two fingers in worship, so that we can hold you in our hearts in the week to come.
A reading is by the poet Tony Hoagland, this called Voyage. I feel as if we had opened a book about great ocean voyages and found ourselves on a great ocean voyage, sailing through December around the Horn of Christmas and into the January sea and sailing on and on in a novel without a moral, but one in which all the characters who died in the middle chapters make the sunsets near the book's end more beautiful. And someone is spreading a map on a table, and someone is hanging a lantern from the stern, and someone else says, "I'm only sorry I forgot my blue parka, it's turning cold." Sunset, like a burning wagon train, sunrise like a dish of cantaloupe, clouds like two armies clashing in the sky, icebergs and tropical storms. That's the kind of thing that happens on our ocean voyage. And in one of the chapters, I was blinded by love, and in another, anger made us sick like swallowed glass. And I lay in my bunk and slept for so long, I forgot the ocean, which all the time was going by right there outside my cabin window. And the sides of the ship were green as money, and the water made a sound like memory when we sailed. Then it was summer, under the constellation of the swan, under the constellation of the horse. At night, we consoled ourselves by discussing the meaning of homesickness. But there was no home to go home to. There was no getting around the ocean. We had to go on finding out the story by pushing into it. The sea was no longer a metaphor. The book was no longer a book. That was the plot. That was our marvelous punishment. The story tells us that long, long ago in the city of Krakow, which is the most beautiful city in Poland, which is a country far, far from here, there was a poor rabbi named Rabbi Isaac who dreamt the same dream 3 nights in a row: go and search for a hidden treasure. The dream sends a call to him with such urgency and vividness and power and strangeness that he can't ignore it. It tells him, walk away from whatever you're doing, go find a hidden treasure. And it wasn't even clear in the dream what the treasure was, only that it was precious and he was to take to the road and search for it. I've had that experience, that feeling in church some days, some seasons in my life. Maybe you have too. I know I'm supposed to be here. I know I'm supposed to be looking for something. I know that search matters, and I don't exactly know what it is. I don't know where the journey will lead. Only the heading to follow, only that I should make the journey. There's a voice, an impulse, a call, a drive that you have to follow to search without knowing by what name to even address the thing you're searching for. I think you've had some of that experience too, probably. And I think this story endures and people keep telling it because despite its fantasy, it says something real about what it feels like to be alive in the world. out of this life, there is something that has woken you up and will not let you go. There is some dream from the holy, whatever name you call it, whatever form it comes, some word from the holy that won't let you go back to sleep again and has brought you here to make a life in this house, this virtual house among a company of traveling people, searching people. What makes the story a great Jewish tale, not just a great folk tale, is what Isaac does with the treasure. He builds a synagogue, the house of prayer, a gathering place for his community. And so in his dream, in the story, it isn't just treasure he finds, it's not just cash, but the ultimate treasure, a place where his whole community could reach for God, reach for the spark of the divine in each other. The treasure he found then at the end of his journey was a house where his people could journey together, following those words that come in the dark of the night, seeking and living into a love that doesn't let us go. Isaac searched for treasure, and the treasure he found was a new journey, a new search. Returning home, he found, instead of ending, a new invitation. These last 15 months have been a different sort of journey, difficult and dangerous, and nearly 600,000 Americans who otherwise would be here didn't make it through this journey. And there's no amount of sweetness they can add to the sunsets in the late chapters of the book that makes up for that. And mixed with grief is anger, too, anger at the abject failure of our government and too many fellow citizens to take responsibility and stop a calamity. Anger, grief, numbness. All of that's part of this year's journey. The poet says, "I feel as if we opened a book about great ocean voyages and found ourselves on a great ocean voyage." Icebergs and tropical storms, the kind of thing that happens on our ocean voyage. And in one of the chapters, I was blinded by love. And in another, anger made us sick like swallowed glass. And I lay in my bunk and slept for so long, I forgot about the ocean, which all the time was right there going by outside my cabin window. We've had those chapters this year. There were months, probably, of languishing. We may still be in that right now for some folks. Months of languishing, of stagnation, of emptiness that sometimes you fill with too much sleep or food or alcohol, or too carefully and deliberately not enough sleep or food. Languishing, not failing, not flailing, not flourishing, just surviving one day to the next. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. If you didn't learn a new skill and master a new language in the last 15 months, nothing has gone wrong. You did not fail even a little bit. You needed to survive. We needed to make it this far. Already, and in the months ahead, we're slowly re-emerging into the world, and hopefully, good things to come. Vaccination becomes available for 12 to 15-year-olds this week here in Chicago, and hopefully in the not too distant future for younger kids too. And I think of my own kids and I and the summer ahead swimming in the lake and rainbow cone without masks, and reopening church, for outdoor summer services that we'll have in the parking lot in person, live streamed simultaneously. These months ahead are filled with good things and difficult things too, and will be exhausting. We all have to relearn how to be in the world. And your reserves of energy and patience and hope are going to be low. That's okay. If re-emerging feels overwhelming, it's not because something's gone wrong. It's because, of course, that's how it's going to feel. I think of folks I've known who had hip replacements. And there's this acute period of healing that follows. Maybe surgeons are going to say 2 or 3 weeks. It's 4 or 6 weeks. But finally you get to the point where you can move around okay again. And you start, for the very first time, to go back out into the world again. A person with a new hip going for a cup of coffee for the first time, that will be the whole day. That trip to the coffee shop and back again, that will be overwhelming and exhausting. Not because something's gone wrong, but because the reserves are low and it takes time for your body to build back up again the strength and mobility and flexibility to move. It's going to be the same for us in the months ahead. If re-emerging feels overwhelming, it's not because something's gone wrong. That's how it's going to feel. Be gentle with yourself as you build those social muscles back up again. The habits and the practices that you learned to survive pandemic were tools that you probably needed to survive pandemic. But as the saying goes, the tools you relied on to survive won't serve you when it's time to thrive. Often in this last year, after all the household work was done and the kids were in bed, it was the first moment of the day that I had to myself. And so I would spend 2 or 3 hours procrastinating going to bed, playing video games, watching TV, reading a book, all these things to have time to myself. I needed that during pandemic. I needed space. And I know some folks are way more isolated and need people, but for me, I needed that time just for myself. But the cost was not getting enough sleep on a whole lot of nights. That was my survival strategy for some difficult times. You probably had your own. That won't let me thrive, re-emerging again. I've got to unlearn it. And that's going to take time to change habits, months to change habits. It's straightforward enough to say a word about where we are right now and what's ahead, and it's practical to identify that there will be potholes in this road. It's harder to say just what precisely to do because each of our experiences have been so different one from the other, even when they've shared so much in common. Let me offer you 2 guideposts that can carry you through this journey that is returning. First is to avoid fake fights and follow the compass. Every single person who is hearing these words right now, you have something that you probably feel so passionately about that you might be ready to pause the service to tell everyone else why it is the most important thing. If you feel that way, if you've got something like that, that's okay. Of course you do. That's pretty normal human stuff. As we come back together, though, we're going to have less patience and hotter tempers. So avoid fake fights and follow the compass. In the months ahead as we return, the biggest and most important question won't probably, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, won't, as a community, be whatever that most passionate thing is, probably. In the months ahead, the biggest and the most important questions as a community are going to be, how do we live out the mission of this congregation? What will that look like now? That's what the board wrestles with as they think about what reopening and returning looks like. Fundamentally, the question is, how do we live out and embody the mission of the congregation as we do this? What will that look like? What are we here for? I mean, what are we gathered in spiritual community on this particular corner in this particular city? What are we here to do? What can we uniquely do? What are we called to do? That's real. And sure, there may be differences of opinion. We know how to disagree with each other politely. But that's different than the fights that trap you and weigh you down and are side paths that don't take us as a community forward. So there's one piece. The other is to suggest that when it comes to matters of heart and spirit, how you get to your destination is the destination at which you will arrive. That's true for individuals, that's true for us as a community. What I mean is, there's no way, for example, there's no way to hate yourself into being a better person. Oh, I really dislike myself. I dislike some aspect of my personality. I dislike my body size or shape or whatever it is. Oh, I hate it so much. I'm gonna hate myself into feeling better about myself. No, how you get there is where you arrive. If you need to relax, if you are a stressed out person, even what my shoulders just did, I'm walking around like this all the time, carrying that tension. There's no amount of forcing yourself to relax that will end up with you being a more relaxed person. How you get there is where you arrive. There's no amount of bitter argument that's going to make you more loving. The poet Philip Booth writes this called Heading Out. He says, beyond here, heading out, beyond here, there is no map. How you get there is where you'll arrive. How, dawn by dawn, you can see your way to feel. You've no need now, clear, in ponds, sky, just as woods you walk through give to fields and rivers. Beyond all burning, you'll cross on bridges you've long lugged with you. Whatever your route, go lightly toward light. Once you give away all save necessity, all's mostly well. What you used to believe you owned is nothing beside how you've come to give in or give out. The way you're going, your body seems willing. Slowly, as it may otherwise tell you, whatever it comes to, you're bound to know. We'll find out our story by pushing into it. We'll find returning home not ending, but a treasure which is a new invitation into a new journey. Beyond here, there's no map. And how we get there, as individuals and as a community, is where we'll arrive. Go with gentleness, then. For yourself and each other, follow love's compass and make your treasure a community of travelers. Amen.
We join together weekly to renew our bonds of friendship and community, to learn from one another, and to practice the skills of co-creation that we might help heal the larger world. Our time together is but one expression of our values. May we always remember to carry the love and lessons of our collective life here at Beverly Unitarian out into the larger world. Our worship is ended. Our service begins.